At Oracle Red Bull Racing, every role exists for one purpose: to make the car go faster.
Extreme desires to go faster than everyone.
The difference between winning and losing
really is a team effort.
And it's evolution, it's no different to the car.
Yeah. Every refinement, no matter how small, shifts momentum.
What a drive from Max.
Every tool, every idea, every layer of security, all to give two drivers the chance to push the limits.
How close he is able to be from the limit, lap after lap.
All the work of so many becomes the focus of just two.
Ultimately, the drivers want to win.
Driver's feedback is ultimately the true reflection, right?
Because in the end, the drivers are the final link.
I'm Callum Nicholas, and this is Securing the Win, where we uncover the hidden stories in Formula One
And with one password,
take you inside one of the sport's most secure organisations. As a mechanic, I helped build Max Verstappen's championship-winning cars. And now, as an Oracle Red Bull Racing ambassador, I'm bringing you the unheard stories that defined championships. All right, so before we speak to the drivers, joining me today is one of the most trusted voices in Formula One, a friend of the Securing the Win podcast, and one of the most familiar voices on your screens at a race weekend. Chris Medland, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, mate. What an intro.
You like that?
I'll take that, yeah.
Nice. Well, you are, friend of the podcast and a trusted voice. We've got used to hearing your sort of unbiased for starters, but also, your way of delivering the news that we're looking for from the paddock. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I try my best, but I'll admit, I don't think all fans would agree with that, analysis. It's the nature of the beast, isn't it? When you've got a sport where people are so passionate about it.
I was going to say all fans very rarely agree on anything.
Yeah.
But Chris, you've been around Formula One for a very long time now. You've been able to see how teams operate up close and personal. You know the personalities, the pace that they're working at. So tell me, describe a little bit for me the relationship between the drivers and all of those working back here at the factory to deliver those results.
Yeah, it's an interesting one that we see, because we see the tip of the iceberg as media, and you're running around in the paddock, you're wanting to get opinions as quickly as you can, you want to speak to as many people as you can. And teams are very, very kind of closed off in terms of they pick who can be a spokesperson. They don't want everyone talking all the time to everybody. But then the drivers then become the key figure. And from my perspective, you want to hear a driver's point of view on any topic. So even if it's something that they're not really actually the best qualified person for, they are the big name that everyone wants to hear from. And I sometimes have learned that carries huge pressure for them, because they are representing everybody within a team. Yeah. And then you're asking them for their opinion, where that opinion carries weight all the way back to the factory, everybody back listening to it. And you must have had occasions yourself in your career where you've seen something a driver's said and been like, yeah, why are we telling people that though? Or yeah, I know why they've said that. Where maybe us on the outside wouldn't have had the same context, and you realise that they have to choose their words so carefully sometimes. Yeah,
I mean, you're absolutely right. I think nowadays I'm more worried about things that I might say that affect the thousands of people working towards this. But, it's kind of wild when you think about it. You've got thousands of people working back at base to help deliver these cars and make them faster each week. You've walked every garage in the pit lane. What's sort of the difference? Do you sort of notice the differences between teams and teams that sort of stand out in sort of that perspective, in the way that they sort of deliver that?
I'd say actually they're very subtle differences. Like the thing I think that we see with different teams is that they have kind of like a brand they want, an image they want to give off. Yep. But at the same time, because of the way the rules are written, the number of personnel you can have somewhere, cost caps, things like that, everything is kind of channeled into similar ways of being, ways of working, ways of approaching things. And then teams are looking for tiny details that make a difference. And that's what you really notice, is that in general, you can go and speak to a team and you roughly know how they operate. You roughly know what they might even say to you when you ask a question, when you want to know something. But it's the small things where they're looking for the difference and looking for the edge. And it's not just in terms of maybe the hardware they have or the partnerships they have. It's then the people they have and the way they work together. But yeah, I mean, using Red Bull as the perfect example, from the moment they came into the sport, they wanted to do it differently. They wanted to be kind of disruptors. They wanted to be energetic. Yep. But you'll have seen it. As a team becomes successful, there's a point where all of the focus does go on to winning and making sure you continue winning. And I think for every team, when they get there, that kind of channels everything else down to, well, that's the main goal here. We are here, we are competitive, we're going to win. And that's when I think, weirdly, you actually see more similarities between teams, because they're so focused on that final result, really.
I guess that's sort of where they converge, right? Because as you said, and I've always believed that this is a people sport. Despite the technology and the engineering and all of that, this is a sport that's built on people. But ultimately, it does come down to that focus, right? When you get to the sharp end and winning is all that matters.
Well, as you say, and that the people thing is what I think most people outside of sport totally forget.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. Like whoever's got the best car has the best chance of winning.
Yeah.
But how did that best car come about? Well, people were designing it, whatever technology they had behind them, whatever tools they had available. And if you don't have the right people in the right place, then you're not going to get everything out of it. And when it is so restricted in terms of regulation, in terms of number of personnel, in terms of the way that you can go about your work, then it does come down to that chemistry between people. And you must have seen it as well in the sense of when the team's working well, when it's all harmonious, and everyone's happy with their job, it must make things seem so much easier and things must flow much better.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's, I look to the 2023 season as one where it really stood out in the garage that just everything was so well gelled. I feel like that was the season where for the first time in many years, it felt like we did everything right, and it makes you so formidable as a force. I think back to Mercedes during their era, 2014 all the way up to, 2019, 2020. And one of the things that we used to say is that they were such a good unit and they did everything well. And it makes you so hard to beat.
Well, I was going to say on that front though, like from a media perspective, I was there in 23 being like, come on, someone go and challenge Red Bull, winning every week. But at the same time, it's because you then got used to it in the sense of you couldn't see a weakness.
Yeah.
And it was the same personnel generally, wasn't it? It's the same team working together, but the way they were working was just so impressive that you thought they're not going to crack here. No one's going to trip up at this point. Whereas when it starts to get more, dare I say, competitive between multiple teams and you see the pressure change, that's when you sometimes see mistakes creep in and you realise what a great job a team was doing to be so dominant because it is still the same kind of combinations and it's just how settled everyone was.
Absolutely. And you've followed this team through many different eras now. Have you sort of seen that there's been a sense of a change of momentum or what do you see? Do you see that there's been a shift this year in terms of the way that the team's operated?
Absolutely. I think, you look at how tough things got at the end of last year and at times at the start of this year. And it really felt like where I think Red Bull worked smartly was looking inwardly and going, okay, where have we gone wrong? Rather than looking outwardly. We've had it with different teams in the past where they point the finger of blame. There are variables that are outside their control, and if they point to those, then it seems like, well, we're doing a good job, but this is where something's going wrong, whether it's a different supplier or whatever. Now, with Red Bull, there wasn't any of that. It was, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to reflect on to get stronger? And I think that's really led to the quick turnaround. It caught me by surprise massively for the team to come back from where it was mid-season to be able to be so competitive coming into the end of the year. But then what's so impressive about that is that you knew that it was in there from the past, from 2023, from the start of 2024. But when it kind of, dare I say, if a team feels like it's lost its way, you think, wow, that's going to be so hard to get back. Really impressive turnaround to be able to so quickly get back on the right path.
Yeah, this is it. I think when you have a big reset like that, you sort of accept that it might take a little bit of a while to get back to where you were. And it's not to say that we're necessarily putting in all the performance that we'd want to see on track, but I think it's been a noticeable shift to getting back to what we're used to doing, which is hopefully winning.
So some people say that winning's addictive, and it must be addictive, but at the same time, it must be really rewarding to fight back when you weren't winning. I mean, dare I say, is there like a difference in terms of the satisfaction you would feel when you'd been so dominant and every week winning compared to when it's been a while?
I think the pressures are very different, right? So I distinctly remember during 2023, the pressure for us was that you just don't want to be the person that makes that mistake, right? You don't want to be the person that ends this winning streak, and you don't want that to rest on you. And then we also say that some of the toughest seasons when you're fighting and you're having to battle back, they can be the most rewarding. I think, I look at all of those years fighting Mercedes, and I say that it was those years where we gelled as a unit and became so good at all these things because we understood what we were up against. And now in this situation where you're chasing another team, and we always say it's easier to be the hunter than the hunted, right? But ultimately, the pressure's the same. The goal is always the same. Winning is always the same. So it doesn't matter. You just have to sort of try and keep your focus on doing the things that you know you can do well, and then sort of have a little bit of faith that it will all come down, to the end, and it'll all come together when you need it to. But yeah, they're two very different mindsets. One of when you're just trying not to screw up, and one of you're like, right, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get back on top. But they are two different ways of thinking about things.
But when you're looking at then trying to chase another team, how much are you looking at that other team or trying to work out what other teams are doing, and how much are you going, well, we've been good in the past, like we'll get back there ourselves, and being more intrinsic?
Yeah, I think there's, with the technical side of it, or even like operationally, when you look at how other teams operate and the way that they go about racing, I think we're humble enough to always say that there's things that we can learn. So you'll always be looking at, is their way of doing that better than what we think our way is? Certainly, even with things like pit stops, we spent 7 years winning the pit stop championships. That didn't mean that the whole time we weren't looking at other teams and saying that there's a little something there that we can learn and incorporate. So it's not necessarily like we feel we know more than the media. I think especially, with the politics and all of the other things that surround Formula One, I think the best way to go about it as a mechanic or a technician is just don't involve yourself, right? There are things that you can control in the world of Formula One, and there's things that you can't control, and it's easier to sort of put that out of your mind. But no, absolutely. I think that you look at other teams, and obviously the engineering department will be looking at what data they do have available about your competitors, and we all take a keen interest in that. I think as a business, we're really good at, it doesn't really matter where you are in the structure of the garage. I think if you notice something that can be contributed to the success, then you speak up and you go and you do it and you see if you can implement it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of aspects that you do try and just ignore. They're not within my purview or my control, so I'm just going to stay out of that and I'm going to focus on these little bits. But absolutely, take inspiration from those around you.
I always find it really funny when different team members would come to media, come to someone like myself and ask, what's so-and-so doing or what's so-and-so saying quite often. They wanted to know what the kind of atmosphere was like at another team and how they were feeling about things. And it was never, as media, I think teams are very good at being protective of the really key details, like the important stuff that they do not want getting out. But there's other things where they can take the temperature compared to each other and kind of get a feeling for how things are going within a team. And that's the stuff that almost the data gets traded between teams is almost via the media there. But then the core stuff that we're all trying to find out, why is the team doing so well? Why are Red Bull so dominant in 2023? What's the secret? Teams don't tell us that. They don't want to tell each other that either. But that must be, from a team member perspective, that must be quite daunting, because I guess you would have had access to secrets as such in terms of seeing how the cars run, seeing how things work, that others would love to know, and you've got to be so careful that there's never any chance of them finding out. Yeah, I mean,
it's a bit of a pressure. I mean, certainly for me, transitioning roles into doing sort of more media-facing stuff, it was something that I was acutely aware of. I think one of the ways in which you sort of mitigate that is this sort of policy of having where, and it seems really harsh, but people only knowing what they need to know. It's a bit of a blessing, in a way, like there's certain things that people can ask me about and I can genuinely say, I don't know, and that's actually a lot easier than trying to do these kind of things and having to really be careful about what you say and not give anything away. I think that sort of policy of giving people the information that they need to perform their job well, but not more than that. And I think sometimes it seems a little harsh. I tell you, when I moved into this role from my previous, it was like instantly I just didn't have visibility of a load of the technical areas of the business. And at first I was like, oh, that's a bit sad. I've been used to that for the last 10 years. But actually, it took me a little while to realize that this is a real blessing. I can focus on the things that I can actually affect and have an impact on, and not worry about the things that, if anything, you just become a risk.
And it's so easy though as well that from a media perspective, you get asked certain questions and some people will try and act like they know. Obviously, there's so little that anyone outside knows. When fans are looking and saying, oh yeah, this must be happening, that might be happening, it's like, we've got no idea. We can ask the questions, but it's what the teams tell us, it's what they're willing to let out is all that you're ever going to find out. But that's because this sport is so competitive, especially now. One of the things we talk about actually about 23 being so dominant, but we're only 2 years on and it's so competitive across the entire field. Brazil was, I think, the closest Q3 we've ever had, the field spread there. Like, that shows why the tiny little details that teams don't want to let get out matter so much, because the tiniest gain from what seems something so innocent can have a huge impact on competitive order, can't it?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I think the things that you wouldn't necessarily think are big secrets, they can unravel really quickly, right? And before you know it, there's a whole load that can be revealed that you just wouldn't want to be out there for your competitors to use, right? I mean, have you seen, over the years, having followed so many different teams and been around the paddock, have you seen that teams take different approaches to this secrecy? Are there sort of some teams that take one approach and other teams that take a completely different approach? Is that something that you have to sort of get used to as a journalist?
I wouldn't say you have to get used to it. What's quite good is, from a journalist point of view, you can always go and ask the question. Then teams know you're going to come and ask a question. You're going to try and find something out. There's some that are almost offended that you'd even ask, and they're very blunt in saying no. And I think the difference you kind of find is some teams will not really consider why you want to know, or even ask you why you want to know. They fear you finding something out and they block you straight away. Others are more collaborative. They're kind of saying, okay, well, why are you asking that? Or we can't really tell you about it, but this is why we can't tell you about it. And you get a much better understanding, at least, of why teams are closed off. But at the end of the day, they're all doing the same thing. They're protecting their IP. They've got, partners are required, partners like 1Password are required because it's so important that is protected. A team member can't just go to you and say, oh, by the way, this is why we were bad the other week. It's this detail here, because you might write it. And it's not that you would ever want to do something that's damaging to a team, but I always think the job as the media and journalist is to try and bring fans as close as possible to the sport. Tell them as much as you can. So when you ask those questions of teams, you know it can be very sensitive. You know it can be maybe damaging to them. If you consider it might be, you tend to go, am I okay to report that? Can I say that? Because if you can't, at the very least, you can make sure you're not saying something that's wrong, and you don't want to lead anyone down the wrong path.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's so important in today's sort of media landscape as well. But when you ask these questions and you get certain responses for teams, are there any sort of signals for you that a team is particularly trying to protect a certain bit of either IP or information? Are there any sort of things that you pick up on?
Yes, they become harder to deal with. They become they dodge things, and I like to think I've got a pretty good relationship with all teams across the paddock, and some are more collaborative than others, but at the very least, no one that I think, well, they're not going to talk to me because they don't like me. You try and keep it respectful, fair. You've got to have that honesty between both sides and trust that if I ask something, when they give me an answer, that I either believe them or I understand why I'm being told something. But for some, when you might have a really good relationship, suddenly you're like, well, I asked a fairly obvious question or something that you would normally answer, and you've dodged it, or you've given me an answer that I really don't buy, and you've made it clear that I shouldn't buy it. But then you're picking up on, okay, there's a reason. There must be a reason why they don't want to tell you. And it does happen. Quite often it's things like, drivers, when it might be driver contract stuff and they don't know what's going on, but they're trying not to make sure that you say anything that could be problematic further down the line. I had it with a different team actually fairly recently that did that, where I just wanted to set up an interview and it kept getting knocked back and knocked back. I'm like, this is very strange. I'm here to promote the driver, or I say promote, but it will promote the driver. And that driver ended up, it was one of the junior drivers no longer with the team. And you realise then that there's decisions made obviously we don't know about, and they can't go promoting something that's going down a different direction. So you start to pick up on those triggers then, and you understand that you can only get as much of a picture as they're willing to tell you. And I also think it's something that fans need to sometimes realise as well. The way things appear isn't always the way things are. It's just because at a certain moment people can't reveal certain things. They can't explain the detail, the context, and jumping to conclusions just because you've been told no, that isn't always the most helpful way to go about things as well. So I try and keep that in mind, that if a team does become hard to deal with, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and I think, it's nice. Formula One has always been a sport that's going to have, a certain amount of secrecy and protection and sort of that sense around it. So, moving on from the teams and talking about the drivers in themselves, you've had the opportunity to interview, I think, pretty much every driver on the grid, I imagine, this season. How do you often, when you're talking to them, do you get a sort of sense of what they're saying versus what they mean?
Yeah, it's interesting because you have two different dynamics. You have like a group session where you're all, I wouldn't say fighting for a microphone, but you're having to wait your turn to ask one question in isolation. And that must be so hard for a driver because the topic can change so quickly and they have to think quickly about what they're going to say because they're representing so many people, as we said earlier. Other times are one-on-one, much more considered. You can get into detail. You can explain the context of your question, why you want to know something, and they tend to be much more collaborative like that. But I found it with speaking to Max, for example. he's someone who does not mince his words. No. And when you ask him a question, you get the answer that he is happy to give you, which is, and generally an honest answer too, but he's not going to give you a 2-minute answer when he can explain that in 20 seconds. Yeah. He's just efficient, to the point, and that's it. Other drivers, maybe sometimes worried about being taken out of context or wanting to explain from their own point of view as well, will talk for much longer. Yep. And you do see this huge difference in the way that they go about it. And I think part of it can be when drivers are maybe worried about the way they come across.
Okay.
Max definitely isn't. Max is definitely someone who is not. You'll have
That's
seen
what we
it.
love about him.
Yeah, exactly. He's straight to the point. And I imagine he's similar to work with in terms of the way he interacts with the team.
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that we say about Max is that he puts his helmet on and he becomes this killer out on track. But actually with us in the garage, he's such a great human, and even though that sometimes, you'd be talking to him about something and the answers might seem blunt, it's just, that's how he expresses himself. It's efficiency. It's something that we can all appreciate in Formula One. But when you're talking to the drivers, particularly about car issues, obviously the drivers are constantly in this feedback loop with their engineering team. How much do they realistically reveal to you about what's really going on with the cars?
It depends what you know or what you understand. Yeah. So there's certain drivers that straight away go, well, you're not going to get what I'm talking about here. So they keep it very top line. Okay. There's others that do not want to discuss it at all. They're kind of like, well, the car's just not handling well. I'll deal with it with the team. Yeah. And there's some that will go into detail. If you ask that question and you show that interest, they will try and explain it in a way you either understand, or they'll explain it in a way that you're never going to understand, but they're being fairly open about it. I think it also depends on their mood. When, as media, we get them, actually, quite often before the team do, you get, I guess, the instant feedback from within the car and the second they get out. But quite often then they're dragged away to come and do media, to come to the TV pen or the broadcast zone. And you get to ask, how's the car feeling after qualifying, for example. And then after that, they get to go back to the team and re-download it. I mean, do you see a difference between the moment they get out the car and they're first giving that feedback and maybe a bit later? Is it more considered later, or is it similar styles?
What I didn't have insight into were the actual drivers' briefings, so when Max and Yuki, and they'll go and sit with the engineering team and really dig into the data and discuss it. I didn't have much visibility of that. I always used to say that we could judge how the weekend was going by that initial reaction on the radio, even if it wasn't necessarily saying, oh, the car's great, even if it was like, I've got this issue and that issue. You can tell by the demeanor whether it's something that we're confident we can rectify, or if you can tell straight away. And I can't imagine what it was like at the weekend in Brazil, just because obviously it was a big turnaround from the sprint race and qualifying to the race. So we don't necessarily have all that insight. They've got so much data, thousands of data points, but ultimately it's driver feel, right, that's going to dictate the direction that car goes in.
Well, on that note, when I was lucky enough to interview Max walking back down the pit lane before the race. So he's taking the car to the end of the pit lane, ready for the start, and then has to come back for the national anthem. I did an interview with him walking back, and obviously the weekend up to then had been really difficult. A lot of changes made to the car. And just on the laps of the grid, he got that instant feel. Yeah. He didn't need, no one had been able to come up with him and show him telemetry or talk about data in that sense. It was, what was he feeling on those laps of the grid? And he was already so much more positive. He had a smile on his face, he laughed during the interview, which you don't always get out of any driver. And he was really looking forward to the race and saying he was going to have to do some overtaking to get in the points, but that he was looking forward to it. Yeah. And straight away, that told you everything. You knew his mindset was, I can move forward. And I think that is probably so much more powerful than him being given a sheet that says, looks like the car's better here. Does it feel better to him? And I think that's, again, the same that we have to read into quite a lot as media is, what is the demeanor? What is the body language? A driver can say one thing, but if their face is telling you another, that's a different matter. And that's as far as we get, because they don't drill down into the data with us. Yeah.
Now, you had the opportunity to go and sit down with both Max and Yuki not long ago. Just quickly before we get into that, having spent time with both of them, what sort of stands out as the sort of different approaches between the two?
We kind of hinted at it a bit ago, but Max does not mince his words, does not waste words if they're not needed wasting. And what's good is you feel like you get a good, clean answer out of him. You get an honest answer. Yeah. If he doesn't want to answer something, he'll say, I don't want to. Yeah. Fortunately, in this occasion, he was very chatty because of what we were talking about, but he will really be to the point. With Yuki, he's, dare I say it, he seems more relaxed when he's talking, but he is more than happy to get into a wider conversation, to spend that time. I do think he's actually, and I think it might surprise people to know, he's not uptight and worried about, well, if I've had a bad weekend or if I've had a good weekend, that's going to change my demeanour. He is just talking to another human across the desk, and you've asked a question, and he's going to try and give you the best answer. So I think you do see their personalities come out for both of them, but you can see what different personalities they are at that same time.
Yeah, so, you get the opportunity to sit down with both drivers, understand them a little bit better. Was there anything that surprised you in terms of the way that they've gone about handling the pressure this season?
Just the fact actually that they do handle the pressure. I'm lucky to get out in the field and speak to them at those times, and for them still to have the capacity to do this sort of interview and think in this way, in and around all the travel and all the pressure results, it's so impressive.
Amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they had to say.
We're looking at how 1Password helps Oracle Red Bull Racing secure the win, Max, and there's been a lot of winning done in your time at the team. Just how special has it been to be part of?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, of course, already a long journey with the team. And of course, when you join, you know what they have done in the past, and you know that you are driving for a top team. Of course, then you don't know how much you are gonna win yourself. But luckily, we've done quite a lot of that ourselves. So, yeah, I mean, it's been incredible, and I think to the stage where it's like a second family for me now. A lot of people, of course, that were working at the team already when I joined are still there, and to be able to do that all together is it's something truly special.
Well, it was one of your dreams to be an F1 driver at some stage, but what's the reality like of competing at the pinnacle of an elite sport like Formula One?
I mean, it is of course where you want to be, but at the same time, of course, you know that there's a lot of people are involved in the team, and in a way, the pressure is always on, but at the same time, you also need to go out from your own talents, and you need to be confident that you can do it. Otherwise, there's no point in trying to be here. So that's how I try to approach it. Work as a team together. Know, of course, in the background that a lot of people are also depending on your results, but at the same time, I'm also depending on them, to get these results. So that also, I think, easily takes a bit the pressure off.
But you speak about leaning on your own talents. I mean, when you're trying to perform to the highest level, you're competing against 20 of the best drivers in the world. How do you go about finding an edge against them?
Well, that is something that hopefully you practice already from your young years in go-karting, and that's how you try to really keep that edge, keep trying to, of course, evolve as well, keep trying to be better, and that doesn't really change from when you just started to F1.
But when you get to F1, you get to a race weekend, you're competing against those guys, you're trying to get the most you can out of your package with the help of the team. Just talk us through that process of trying to get the most out of the car on track.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of preparation is, of course, already done before the weekend, but then when you get to the race weekend, there are always new things that pop up where you want to work on, you want to improve on, and, that happens from FP1 all the way to qualifying, and even throughout the race, you're still trying to, find a better balance, feel more comfortable. Of course, you have a lot of things that you think you have under control, and then suddenly you rock up into the race and it's not, and you have to adapt. And I think at the end of the day, you need to be very quick and being able to adapt to new situations or whatever.
Well, as you're going through the weekend, though, you talk about balance, but in a different way. How do you balance what the data's telling you, what the simulations have said before you get here, and what you actually feel behind the wheel?
I mean, a lot is done by data. And also, of course, something that I rely on a lot, engineers rely on a lot, but at the same time, when you sit in the car, that's where the fine-tuning comes in. You really want to try and fine-tune the car, and that's also then a very personal preference, that it's not always data-driven. That's secondary then.
Yeah, but from your experience, how important is trust between you and your engineer in terms of the stuff you're asking for and talking about? Does GP trust you explicitly?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, that also grew over the years, right? I mean, we've been working together for 10 years. So, that is a long time. And I think, we got to that stage where we almost don't need to speak to each other anymore, and we know already what we want to try or what we want to work on or change. And I think that is super important in Formula One.
And you spoke about, though, simulation that happens before you get here. Once you're here too, simulation still happens, doesn't it? You've got the simulator drivers back at the factory. How important are they? How much are you leaning on them to kind of help you through a race weekend?
Yeah, of course, that is, again, super important, because sometimes the conditions as well, they change in the weekend, or unexpected grip level, like it can be anything, right? Or certain problems with the car that you didn't foresee, and that's why it's still very important to, of course, have a super accurate simulator with very good simulator drivers that can give you that right feedback that, once you come out of FP1, FP2, or whatever, you tell them, okay, you try a few different setup directions, and then it gives you an idea what you need to work on.
But beyond the drivers, you've mentioned this actually yourself a little bit ago, there's more than 1,000 people back at the factory trying to put these two cars on track. Is it pressure that comes with having so many people you're representing, or is it a privilege to work for them?
Yeah, for me, I don't feel any pressure with that. For me, it's positive energy, and knowing that there's so many people that are trying to achieve the same goals, and you do that together, of course. So for me, it's always just super motivating, and really cool, to see everyone once in a while when you get back to the factory as well.
Do you ever think about the scale of the team behind you though when you're out there driving on track?
Not when I'm on the track, no. No, then it's very performance-minded, and of course you think as a team, you think about, of course, consequences or whatever, but not in my mind I'm thinking about, we got like 1,500 people, looking at you now or whatever.
Yeah, that would be
Or
pressure.
plus one anyway, 1,500 plus one.
Yeah, absolutely. But where do you think that you offer the most value to the team? Apart from just driving quickly, but looking to secure the win, what do you really bring that you think maybe sets you out from others?
I think feedback, just always trying to improve, wanting more, giving directions of what I want or what I need from a car.
And you've mentioned you've been here a long time now. Over the past decade, in reality, how much have your relationships changed with the team, and how much has the work you can do changed here in terms of the data you get and the equipment at your disposal?
Of course, also the world evolves, right? I mean, from 2015, 16 to now, tools get better as well to work with. But at the same time, it's just, for me, it's super enjoyable to be working with those people, because you trust each other. You have experienced already so many things together, good and bad. And that only strengthens, I think, the relationship.
And speaking of relationships, you've got a fairly new one with Lauren Mecky's the new team principal. And in our first episode of this series, he said that what's really he's learned recently with you is not what you can do behind the wheel, he knew that already, but how extraordinary you are outside of the car as well. I mean, how special does it feel to be central to this team and pushing it forward?
Yeah, I mean, I have a really good relationship with Laurent. He came in, and that's not an easy job to take over. But I think we're all, we want the same thing. And at the end of the day, we all need to work together very well to be able to achieve it. And I think, we are definitely on the right way. And like you said, I always try to do better. I try to, of course, find gains. I try to advise. And I think, especially when you've been in F1 for 10, 11 years, you learn a lot yourself as well. That means I'm still not an engineer, but as a driver, you feel, of course, a lot what's going on in the car, and through experiences from different kind of cars that you've driven within the team, and looking around, you start seeing where maybe, we can do better, or where we are very good at, stuff like that.
Well, that car as well is constantly evolving, even during the season, isn't it? As you're pushing to develop it. And sometimes it's talked about how teams might develop a car for a driver, but that's surely not the case. Don't you just get in the equipment and drive it as quickly as you can?
Yeah, I don't really get that, because for me, that has never really been the case. I think every team wants to design the fastest car, and the driver gives his inputs when you get the car of what you need to go even faster. And that's what we've always done as a team.
So what's it like when you give the team feedback for the car? Do you say things like, I think we need a new front wing, or is it much more detailed and specific like that? How does that kind of interaction work?
I'm not, of course, I'm not the driver that tells them you need to design the front wing like that, but I do say that I think we are lacking mid-corner or entry or exit grip, with steer. There's a lot of stuff that have to come together, but you always try to pinpoint weaknesses within the car.
From that point, though, how involved are you with the development process? Do you kind of check in with the team about things they're working on, or do they just kind of tell you when something's ready that might address your feedback?
It's continuous. We discuss a lot of things. It's not like I'm asking for it, and at the same time, the team just tells me, when things are in the pipeline or not.
But do you then really feel a difference when things come to the car? Like, does it feel notably different if a new component goes on the car to before, or is it much more subtle than that?
That is always the target. Normally, when bits come to the car, that they work, or you feel a difference. Now, sometimes, of course, that has been better than other times, and lately that has been going really well.
How often do you jump in the car and just go, yes, this is better? Like, what's the feeling like when you get that first proof of the development progress?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, yes, it has been like that, that you say, you're like, okay, now I definitely feel a step forward. And that is, of course, exactly what you want as a driver.
Yeah, and it must be really important for you to kind of share your feeling, your knowledge, your information with the team, with your teammate as well, to help move the team forward. But at the same time, do you ever find that other teams are trying to find things out? Do you get the other drivers on the driver parade cheekily asking you questions about stuff you've done or why there have been gains?
I think that always happens. You ask questions, but I think we're all experienced enough to know what to say and what not.
Well, that kind of leads us into, though, the fact that the importance of the team being so well connected from trackside, but also back to the factory and securing that connection between the two. I mean, how much of an advantage do you think it would be for teams if they knew everything about each other and everything they were doing?
I think a lot of cars will look exactly the same if they would know everything. That's the beauty about Formula One. You see so many different looking race cars because everyone tries to find the lap time in their own way. And I think it's rightly so. That's what makes Formula One very special, That it's not a one-make series, and you have all these manufacturers competing as well with their engines, and and that's also where you see the development race. How a car can look in the beginning of a regulation to the end is normally quite different.
And at times you go out on track as well and you see other cars and the way they're handling, and you're like, I can't wait to feed back to the team, tell them about it, maybe learn from it.
Yeah, we always study everything, including, of course, in our own car, but others as well, from what you can see with your eye or an onboard.
Is that the sort of thing, though, that you wouldn't open a radio and tell them? You'd be like, I'll keep that for when I get back to the garage.
Yeah, it's normally not very necessary, unless it's something critical within the race, but normally you discuss it after.
How do you go about that, though, remembering all this stuff? You're driving Formula One cars at 200 miles an hour. You're having to pilot these incredible machines, and then you've got to go and feed back to the team everything that you're taking in.
That's that's just extra capacity that you have, I guess, as a driver. I think that's also where the difference is between a good driver and a really good driver, where, a lot of people can do fast laps. I mean, that is probably the least hardest thing to do. I mean, if you put 100 drivers on a test day, I think we'll all be doing a decent lap. But it's when the pressure is on and you're under that pressure to perform, to then have that extra capacity as well while driving, to think about other stuff or feedback stuff, and just trying to understand the bigger picture.
And how does that feedback look going from not just to the track but back to the factory as well? How involved are you on a race weekend and making sure everyone working back in Milton Keynes understand what you're feeling, what you're knowing, what you're wanting?
So that depends. Sometimes, of course, it can be done already in a meeting here, but I also have meetings back at the factory, when you sometimes maybe feel that people are, of course, listening in with a headset, but it's sometimes better to just speak face to face, and that happens. That is super important as well at the factory.
Yeah, and obviously you don't want anyone else listening in, which is why it's so important that partners like 1Password are there to secure the connections. But did you know that 30% of sports fans use a password manager, and 80% of those use a sports team or their favourite sports athlete for their password? And another 80% of those only use that 1Password for all of their passwords.
Okay, I'm not like that.
You're not one of those?
No.
No. Well, I can promise you as well that yours isn't my password because there's too many letters in your surname.
I mean, in terms of letters, it would work, yeah. But I didn't know that. That's a funny stat.
We talked about the importance of the simulator, Max. How much time do you spend in the simulator when you go back to Milton Keynes?
A lot. I don't want to count the hours that I do. Even at home, you can set the count, right? But I never turn on the counter. It would not be good to find out at the end of the season.
But if you were in the simulator back in Milton Keynes, it must be, I don't want to ever call it boring, but it must be pretty monotonous work that you have to do. Have you ever done anything to try and spice it up?
Not really, because I know that I'm there for a job, and I know that there's performance in it. So even though sometimes it might be a bit boring, you need to always tell yourself that it's for a good thing. There's a purpose behind it, right? And you need to be professional about it.
What would you change then about the simulator if you could make it more fun? If you're allowed to add one thing to it that you'd enjoy more?
Well, then you don't really sit alone in the room, or it's quite dark, but you need that, of course, for the screens. But in general, if you're a bit more surrounded with people, not such a dark room, if it would be possible. There's stuff like that. It's very basic stuff, but it does make a difference.
And you mentioned using your sim at home. How close to the real sim that you've got in Milton Keynes is that?
It depends, because I think at Milton Keynes, in terms of the platform and the movement, that is really, really important, and I think they got that modeled really well. I don't use that at home. I mean, otherwise my neighbors probably would be crazy as well. They would get crazy with all the noises, and it's way too big also to fit in an apartment. But at the end of the day, it's all about the software that you're using and how accurate that is, right? Because G-forces are very hard to simulate anyway, so it's very important that the software that you're using is correct. And yeah, that is a constant work in progress, to be honest.
Not planning on getting a house where you can put your own home simulator that's as big as the one at Milton Keynes?
Well, maybe not as big as the one at Milton Keynes, but it's something that I'm thinking about, yeah.
How much do you enjoy that time in the simulator though and doing that work?
It depends. I mean, I enjoy doing F1 stuff, but I also enjoy doing GT stuff or prototype stuff. It just depends what is needed at the time.
Yeah, and then when you do come to an F1 race weekend though, it can be pretty structured, 24 race weekends a year, 6 sprints, okay, but if you had a blank canvas and you got to choose what an F1 race weekend looked like on track, how would you shape it?
Definitely a lot less races, only the good tracks, not too many street circuits, 2-day race weekends, an even more straightforward calendar with the flying. So yeah, quite a few changes. No sprints, just the main race, because there's more emotion in it. 1 practice, a qualifying, and a race.
Just 1 practice?
Yeah, why not?
So you don't want to drive an F1 car more? You want to drive it less?
Yeah, I've driven it already a lot. So that's enough in a weekend.
Great stuff. Max, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
No, mate, it was awesome. It's great to see him so smiley and relaxed. It looked like you had a really good time.
Really did, but as you can see from there, like he doesn't give you an answer that's the one he should give necessarily, or that he thinks he should give. He gives the one that he wants to give, and that's what I always actually really like about speaking to Max, and I don't think people appreciate that enough about him.
No, I think we're in it's understandable. We're in this world of PR, and these are huge businesses protecting things like IP and their partners and things like that. But I think it's really refreshing that Max will always just give the answer that's honest to him.
Yeah, I mean, I had such a list of questions there to rattle through, and he was like, yep, we're going to get through all of these because this is what I'm going to say to you, and that's it. Whereas I guess with Yuki, it was very different, and that's one of the things that I guess is a challenge as a journalist, is you've got to learn how is an interview going to go in a different way. But it's also what's really enjoyable about working with a bunch of individuals. Like these drivers are so unique. To operate at the top level, there's not one size fits all. No. From Yuki's perspective, it was kind of a different approach to that. But he was really, really good fun to have as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that sort of difference in personalities can still lead to a successful path, right? There's not just one way to do it. And I think we've seen that over the years with so many different champions and their approach to the sport. I'm interested to see what it was that Yuki has to say, because like you say, it's a very different personality. I've had the opportunity to spend a bit of time with Yuki this year as well, and I think he's always good to talk to. And sometimes he'll give you answers that surprise you a little bit. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Yuki had to say.
Yuki, we're looking at how 1Password helps Oracle Red Bull Racing secure the win, and this team has done a lot of winning with 6 Constructors' Championships, 8 Drivers' titles. How proud are you to represent such a successful outfit?
Yeah, I mean, that's why that's what I wanted to be in this team for a long time. I was aiming for this team since probably when I was since I joined into single-seater categories, and yeah, I'm in this Red Bull family and finally able to get this opportunity in the mid of the season this year. And yeah, I'm very grateful. And I can tell already as soon as I joined why this team has had so much success in these past years. And I'm very enjoying and enjoying challenges as well to maximize this opportunity as much as possible.
It must have been a big personal challenge though, because as you say, you've been part of the junior program, you've raced for Racing Bulls in Faenza, but making the move to Milton Keynes and a team that's over 1,000 people must have been a lot of names to learn at the very least.
Yeah, which I'm really not good at to remembering the name, but it's like, especially the mechanics, the people who's coming to the track consistently, the vibe inside this team is amazing. It's very energetic, bright, and especially mechanics, like how supportive they are in every races. Like, it's like being part of a friends community, but at the same time aiming for the professional, obviously the results, and aiming for the same thing, that basically good result as much as possible. So something, those kind of mixed culture, which I think only in my experience so far Red Bull does it, and that's why I'm so far enjoying it. Yeah.
Well, to work so closely with all those new people as well, though, does it take time to build up trust at this level? Because you've got to trust each other explicitly, I imagine, in elite sport, or does it happen just like that?
That's a good question. I think the trust, obviously, for example, it's been a team for long years, and start jumping into the new team, and initially what the trust level we get is always obviously different. But I think it's coming from just general. I think it's time as well, and I have to make the mechanism of teams trust me. I have to give the results and maximize my performance as much as possible. And also, I think same for them as well. There's a pit stop and performance from the engineers. So I think, in my perspective, obviously there's certain trust that we have, because I think being already in this team, you need to be good, and that's why I'm here, and there's some certain trust. But to be on that, another level that, for example, my teammate Max, having a world championship multiple times, it's a lot different. So to achieve that, to have to keep pushing and myself and proving them every races, basically.
I guess some of that trust comes from spending time with the team as well, like you say. But do you think some of that trust building happens, or most of it happens, when you're out trackside, out on the road, or does it happen back at the factory too when you're working there?
I think it's just in general. I think mostly coming from the track, because this motorsports in the end, we're competing for lap time and the position. So it's always coming from that, but also it helps for sure if I want to go to the factory and have a chat with them, and to build a relationship will obviously increase some trust for sure. And I think in the end, this is a team sport. It's not the individual sport. So, every part of the department have to obviously perform. Without a single department wouldn't be able to perform like this much. So I think to make sure being same page and operates in the same level as we all wanted, I think communication for sure is the key.
Yeah, communication certainly, and I guess some of the time you spend with them back at the factory is stuff that people don't get to see as well. They see a lot of what you do during a race weekend, but not the work behind the scenes. Just talk us through some of that and how much time you spend maybe on the simulator.
A lot. I would say almost every once before the race weekends, and I think mainly it's more for engineering rather than drivers, in my opinion. Especially what we do in factory. It's obviously the pretty highest quality simulator what you're gonna get in the whole world, especially the Red Bull one. And mainly what we do there is trying to optimize the setup as much as possible virtually, so we can bring the best kind of estimate setup into the session, because we have such a limited time throughout the week. Most of the time we have only 3 sessions before qualifying, 1 hour each, but you're gonna get only 2 tires. And in some races, we have sprint qualifying race, we have only 1 free practice. So those kind of simulator work for sure is very important. It's a long day for sure, but it's a thing that is really, really important for the team, and also for the future development as well. So it's definitely a key factor.
How similar does that sim feel to the car you then drive at track when you first get to an FP1?
I think it also depends on the driver, how they feel is probably different. In my perspective, it's close how the car behaves, for example, but how I feel in the car is a little bit different. I mean, it's close obviously, but you don't have G-force, like kind of every bump feeling. Even though you have a bit of bump feeling, it's quite close, but I don't know, the thrilling, adrenaline, everything comes together when you're driving, right? And those things, obviously, being the car and feel everything together, and being the simulator with the limited Pro tools is a lot different.
But then even reality, I guess, when you go from different tracks, the car can feel different on each circuit. So how do you go about kind of handling that when you get to a race weekend and learning and adapting during those practice sessions to get the car to a window that you want it to be in by the time you go racing?
It's always about, like I said, lap time, and I think it depends on the track. It's always different things required in terms of setup. Some track needs a good amount of rear support to carry the speed into the corners. Some track needs a lot of good front to make sure you can rotate before and put it forward as soon as possible. So I think you feel it kind of automatically. You don't really force myself to, okay, what kind of setup I want. It's just jump into the first session and you feel something there. Obviously, car behaves also differently in each track, and you kind of adjust from that point. Like I think simulator will gives you some estimate kind of behavior, what you're gonna get, and to get some ideas. So that's why we kind of prepare in beforehand. Okay, if this situation happen, we're gonna use this setup. You know, that's why we're doing that. So I think it's combination with simulator works, preparation work, what we done before the race week, and how exactly what I gonna feel in the first session.
And you mentioned the importance of communication earlier as well. Like, how much is the team involved in kind of setting directions during the race weekend, and how much of it is on you and your feedback? Is it kind of a big combination?
So what I feel basically, what I'm gonna tell about this the setups is basically depends on what car behaves, right? And sometimes the car behaves in a way that you can't really tell in the data. For example, in this the PC and those things, the sensitive things, basically the driver are gonna feel it. And those very small detail, what we're gonna what we feel, we're gonna tell the engineers, and we're gonna apply and kind of give the request what kind of car it wants based on that. Also, what the teams gonna look at, also not just the track side, there's also operation teams that working in the factory and in background, checking for, make sure all floors is working, all front wing, every part, make sure it's working. And some parts you can adapt in live as well. So those things you really cannot really feel, the driver cannot really feel, compared to what kind of performance we expect that each part's gonna perform. You can't really tell, right, when you're in the car. And those things, optimization is coming from the teams, and those combinations for sure will create some beautiful fast car.
But how hard is that to balance then, I guess? Because there must be times that the team are telling you certain things, or the data is telling you certain things, and you're feeling something different. How much do you lean on your feeling and also lean on what the data is telling you?
Just depends on driver as well. Some driver prefer to adjust or adapt from the basically data tells, and some drivers likes to believes that what they feel, and some tracks, some situation, goes to the way that, okay, maybe the driver is right, or some day engineers right. But that's a really difficult moment. I think you have to both consider that, what for the driver, which level you can take, how much we can find a middle way from the request and from engineers and from the driver. I think the combination will, in the end, gives overall performance. I think you cannot just drivers to say, okay, I want this car, so make it like this guy, because they also see some different perspective, like I said, from data. So you gotta always be open-minded and try to find a middle way.
And you've mentioned that team back at the factory that are doing a lot of the work as well, not just those trackside here. You've got simulator drivers doing some of that work. How important are they, and the feedback that they're then giving you, or solutions they might offer up after Friday practice?
Yeah, it's very important, especially the preparation. What we do before the race week is always the estimate thing. Estimate kind of grip, what we're gonna get in the track, the grip level, what kind of behavior we're gonna get. Also, those sort of things. It always comes from estimate, but when it actually hit the track in FP1, FP2, that will becomes the reality, right? And that a lot of sensor from the car will tell us, okay, what's the differences from the preparation, what we done, and they can optimize the simulator. So simulator kind of looks like actual real car. It depends on also the track, the wind direction will create a lot of different behaviors, and that will brings another kind of different limitations what I was having in the simulator. So those things, and also simulator is always also limited session as well, so you cannot really experience fully. And those moments, those simulator driver will fill fill up those limitations and kind of session time that we didn't have, and adjust in life.
But that shows the importance of that, I guess, communication and transfer between the track and the factory. Do you ever think of how many people are back there working, trying to support you and help you, and how many you're representing? Like over 1,000 people back at the factory trying to put these two cars on track.
Yeah, it's a lot for sure. I mean, being a specialist team, joining this team, and amount of people I heard how many people they're working for 2 drivers. It's insane, and you know that becomes come from responsible, and you know that's why you want to perform high as possible. You know, try to match the expectation or the result that what the people want from the factory, and but that's what we enjoy, right? We lose together, we win together, and that's why we go through the moments together. And when we have a good moments, that's why we always we enjoy that moments all together, because that's what we wanted to have, and that's what we always give the 100% performance from each angles.
But at the end of the day, it is just the 2 drivers that get to go out on track and drive these cars, and you're going up against Max Verstappen. What's the challenge of that like, to kind of learn from him, maybe see what he's doing, but also not lose sight of your own strengths?
Yeah, it's not easy. You know, I think more I work with him now, started to understand why he's the best driver in the world currently. I think, or anything, probably the best in any driver in history. So yeah, I mean, but at the same time, it's a good opportunity to also to get my level up to the level that you never expected. So it's not easy to combine with. Obviously, you want to give the result, and as a teammate, as a driver, obviously you want to beat the teammate as well. But you have to accept certain things, and to make yourself open-minded will give the another step. You know, if you always think about trying to beat him, which is currently really not easy at, and if you only think about your performance, it won't never work. So it's not easy, but I think most important thing is try to learn, be open-minded, and get some goodness from him as much as possible. But at the same time, support the team and get the good points as much as possible.
As you mentioned, you've got to work together a lot to help move the team forward, and ideally then improve results for both of you as well. But then there's plenty of stuff that you don't want other people to know. I mean, have you ever had it when you go out for the drivers' parade and one of your other rivals is going, hey, tell us what you've been doing here, tell us what you've been doing there? Is it kind of, you've got to be a bit cautious sometimes to make sure people don't understand what the team's doing to be successful?
Definitely. I mean, you don't want to give any information as much as possible. You know, they can be sometimes sneaky, but yeah. But at the same time, yeah, I think all the drivers want from goodness from each team. So each team has goodness, but that information is basically coming from the hard work that people gave from in historic, and not just from that year, from the previous years as well. So. And also, obviously, you want to be better as much as possible from the other competitors. So definitely, I try to shut my mouth in those areas for sure, and don't give me information, and proceed and everything inside the team internally.
Yeah, it shows the importance of having to protect all of the data that the team's got, but every team's doing something similar in that sense. Do you then have to be careful? We've heard you on the team radio sometimes, it's made you a real firm fan's favourite for some of your passion and the comments you've made on the radio, but do you have to find yourself stopping yourself from saying certain things? You're like, I'll keep that for when I get back to the garage. Yeah,
especially certain things you want to say in the radio, because you can adjust that in live, but you want to be simple and basically try to say the thing that also other drivers tell us, you know, this car doesn't turn, so give me more car to turn. You know, you won't say, okay, make the car turn, okay, how about like making, for example, I don't know, camber more, like which degrees or those things. Those are information that you don't want to tell. And I think engineer will understand, you know, the most important thing in that moment is which phase you're lacking at, which kind of phase in the corners, how limited by any behavior. and I think the engineer will automatically will process in their mind, and they will understand more, and they will know what to do in the car to make it better. So yeah, especially it's difficult in the race, fighting against other drivers, a lot of things going on in the same time, but you don't want to tell the strategy, so you kind of also prepare in beforehand what kind of code we want to tell each other.
Yuki, speaking of team radio, have you ever opened it up, pressed a button, said something and thought, that's going to sound really fun on TV?
No.
Really?
I'm just going to say the thing I always felt. I think I don't really think about the TV. So, I have sometimes like idea before the session start when I, for example, doing warm up or just when I have chill moments in my room. Okay, like these frustrations, things happens. If I say like this way, it won't hurt that driver. Also can make an enjoyable radio. But those things normally will forget in 1 second, 2 seconds after once I hold the steering, because it feels like it's just in a different world. So yeah, not in the track.
No. Do you ever do stuff like that on the simulator when you're spending all that time? You said you some long days doing running. I guess you're talking to the team directly. Do you have a bit of fun with them over the radio intercom?
Yeah. I think I had more. I had more in the simulator for sure. I also probably swear more in the simulator rather than in track. But yeah, I remember I started to understand how to not press the radio button when I'm in frustration these days. So I think I'm able to control myself quite recently, and which I'm happy at. I know that some people miss my kind of exciting radio, but yeah, maybe it'll come when the global regulation will change. Currently it's quite sensitive in those things. So yeah.
Yeah, got to be careful what you say on
Exactly.
air. But I guess that does give you a bit more freedom in the sim to say what you want. But I imagine frustration isn't as high in the simulator either. You're just working through everything you need to work through. If there was anything you could change about the simulator to make it more fun, what would you change?
Good question. I would give opponent in the simulator. So like, basically in simulator you just drive by yourself in the track. For driving circles for whole day. So some session, it's good to have some driver, what they call AI, maybe strong driver, that who's really close out and fight against with. I think that will give, in many ways, quite good, So that'll be good.
Have you ever been able to do anything a bit fun or different in the simulator? Has it always just been work, or have you ever done something that you just really wanted to do?
Sometimes drive the track opposite way.
Really?
Yeah. When engineers are preparing for setup and everything, there's a downtime, so I just drive opposite way.
What's the best track to drive in the wrong direction?
Also going more than 300 kph through the pit lane.
Probably best that you only do that on the sim.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, there's like people standing in the pit lane for some pit stop. Yeah. It's not like, it won't be like Grand Theft Auto that people flying around, but
You just want to see what happens on the sim.
yeah.
So yeah, which track, when you've driven it backwards, which one was most fun, or which one would be coolest
Spa.
to do? Really?
I think Spa was fun. Yeah.
Goes down.
Oh, that was cool.
That would be really different in an F1 car, wouldn't it? In that direction.
I won't obviously do in when it's matter, right? Like when the engineer asks me what kind of behavior you get, but you have always downtime that when they are processing in the background too. So yeah, I always enjoy it. Like you won't get anything out of it, but it's fun.
Fun to say you've done.
Yeah.
Well then, we'll have to come to you if we want any feedback on which tracks we should run in reverse in real life, because you're going to have the most info on that. But if you were going to have a clean sheet of paper and you could write your own race weekend, the way it would look, like when we go racing, how much practice, what would you come up with?
Anything
Anything you want. The Yuki Tsunoda race weekend.
So the track layout itself, I would combine for sure the layout from Suzuka and maybe Netherlands.
Nice.
Some banking, real strong banking.
Well, yours are Max's home races as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That comes very natural.
Yeah.
Being Red Bull for a long time. And well, I would say for race week, I would give, with a complete new layout, you have only one free practice.
Oof.
And straight in qualifying. And and race. So 3 sessions, that's it.
Straight through.
Yep.
Across 3 days?
And the qualifying will be 1 lap each, every driver.
Wow.
In the track. So in the track, or you go, and the driver finish and different driver go. But it comes to the track evolution difference. So that's why it won't be fair probably. But I'll try to find a way.
I appreciate that. That does mean there'll be more sim time needed though to get ready. You've got to do all that preparation now.
No sim day, no sim. That's the regulation. I put the regulation, no sim.
Wow. So how important is it for you to protect everything that the team's doing, protect data, and make sure that other teams don't know what you're up to? Because I guess if everybody knew everything, do you think it would really change how Formula One looked?
I think so. I think in the end, that will look like just basically 20 cars running almost the same car and just a different logo, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's protecting the information is very important. It's like protecting your baby, basically. And but also try to steal the good information as much as possible with our kind of approach, because also having ideas from what kind of design the other car is doing. I think we're gonna get that from pictures and everything, and we're gonna convert that to our car in a better way. So it's always the game, right? Trying to protect our information, but try to steal as much as possible information that our team have. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it shows the importance of partners such as 1Password to protect all that stuff, especially with so much going from the track back to the factory. Do you sometimes find it fun to get back to the factory and kind of be in a secure place where you can go, right, let's talk about all these things we've learned so far over the weekend, and nobody else is around? You're not at a racetrack where there might be so many people paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, try to, be open, and I think able to speak quite loud. Having open conversation is always enjoyable. I think that was still going on, and also in the track as well, in the engineering room. That's why lots of curtains are going on around in engineering. But it's something that definitely is a little bit different atmosphere, and I think every people can be a little bit more open than while we're in the track.
Well, just speaking of protecting data, I've got a stat for you from 1Password that 30% of sports fans use a password manager, and 80% of those people that use that use either their favourite sports team or favourite athlete for their password. And another 80% only use that same password everywhere. Do you need to change some passwords now?
No, I'm good. My password is 000. Okay, it's neither. I have a password that actually I've invented recently, which I quite like it. Yeah.
Got a nice secure one there.
Yeah, it's not a favorite athletes or favorite teams or anything.
Everyone will be very pleased to hear that. Yuki, thanks so much for joining us here on the Securing the Win podcast.
Cheers, thank you very much.
That was a great interview. Did you, I always think when I'm with Yuki, I want to take the conversation to food, because he's a great person to talk to about food, right?
Absolutely. And it was like, the top I had on there, the next day I had another pink jacket on that he saw, and he started asking me about fashion as well. So he loves his food and his fashion. And he was like, where did you get that? But that's, again, a different personality of him, where he's much more sometimes collaborative in the terms of he wants to talk to you about things that are nothing to do with F1, that are just the human elements. And I get that when you become a driver in Formula One, so many people want something from you that I think if it was me, I would shut off. I'd be like, look, I can't have this conversation 20 times a day with 20 different people. Yeah. But with Yuki, he's very willing and open to do that. And I think that's a really good trait he should hold on to.
So look, at the end of the day, all of the stuff we've talked about, the factory and the data, the garage, the IP that we're protecting, it all funnels down to these two drivers, right? Having had that opportunity to sit down with them recently, what were the 2 things or 3 things that you sort of took away from the conversations?
I think the breadth of what they have to think about and worry about as a driver. And
Yeah.
worry might be the wrong word, but we think about driving a car fast. You know, as media, I think as fans, you look at it and go, is someone performing because they're putting a quick lap time out on track? But there's so much more to it. There's so much more stuff that they have to think about. And in terms of, you know, doing these sorts of interviews, but also then representing the team. I mean, you must have seen it as well. When you worked trackside,
Yeah.
you are part of you are the tip of the iceberg. There's, you know, only a set number of personnel that can be there.
Yeah.
There's only 2 drivers that get to drive that car, and there's only so many that can service that car, create, you know, work on a pit stop, that sort of thing. Did you ever feel the pressure of representing so many people when you got nearly 2,000 people back at a factory?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, when I joined this team in 2015, there were like 600-700 people on this campus, and now, you know, we've grown so much, and we're at the best part of 2,000. And as you say, it's such a small snapshot of the team. You know, the race team, that's 60 operational personnel that are on your screens each week. We do have that responsibility to everyone that's sort of back here making these things happen. And you know, it's not the kind of sport where you could do it without all of this support, right? You know, I think of all of the different processes, even like, you know, a really small part has gone through so many hands to get to that point where it's signed off and ready to go on a race car. So you are sort of acutely aware in the back of your mind that you are essentially an end user of what we produce here in this factory. But yes, again, it's the same thing. You know, you feel like you have to represent these people well, either when just in terms of the way you are and what you're doing, but also in terms of the work, you know, like there's that pressure is an innate pressure that's always going to be there, that these thousands of people back here in Milton Keynes that don't get the opportunity to travel to the racetrack, but all of their work has got you here to this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is something that does play on your mind.
Well, and it must be tenfold for the drivers, because they're the ones that then have to go and put the car, you know, on pole position, hopefully, and win a race, you know, for this team. But then because of that and the fact they have to handle that pressure, and when we see them, we're asking them maybe about those roles as media, but do you get similar interactions? Do you see similar personalities with the drivers that maybe those of us on the outside of a team see, or are they different? And is it a different dynamic behind closed doors?
Yeah, I think the dynamic's very different. I think, you know, for us, certainly as a car crew of mechanics, when we're with Max, not in the car, we're not asking him questions about how the car's going, right? You know, we're much more interested in going out for dinner and talking about him and life and family and all these other things. You know, these are the things where, regardless of what role you're in within the team, you can always relate to people, right? And share experiences. So I think it's a very different relationship. Obviously, a performance engineer or a strategist having a conversation with Max outside the car, it's probably more likely to be work related than it is with us as a mechanic, right? Yeah. So we do get to see a different side of a driver. You know, I've had the opportunity to work with so many over the years, and all of those personalities are very different. You know, I think of drivers that are, I think, extremely fun all the time. You're always going to get the smile, and it's going to be the fun side. You might get the drivers that are a little bit perhaps more somber and reserved, but the conversations can be really deep and important and meaningful, and you sort of go away from those and think to myself, oh, this is a great person, not just a great race driver. And I think those are the things that really connect you as a team. They're really important.
Well, like we were saying at the start as well, it shows it is a people sport.
Yeah.
And even everyone almost forgets that drivers are people too. Like, you need that connection with them sometimes, don't you? That human side. And I think it was really cool to see a little bit of that at times with both Max and Yuki.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Chris, I want to thank you so much for coming and joining us and for those interviews, because they were fantastic. So thank you very much for joining us on Securing the Win.
Thank you for having me, mate. Appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Over the course of this season, we've seen that Formula One is built on much more than just speed. Behind every race, every lap, every championship, there's a network of people and partners pushing the limits of what is possible and protecting the margins where performance lives. But the story doesn't stop here, because as one season ends, another one begins. New circuits, new threats, and new innovations waiting to be uncovered. The race to be faster, safer, stronger never ends, all working towards securing the win. We'll see you next season.